David had been living in room 304 for 2 weeks. It was a small rental unit at the end of a dim hallway, with a window overlooking an old parking lot and a street lamp that had been broken for years. The landlord said the place was cheap because not many people liked staying at the dark end of the corridor. But for David, who worked night shifts at a supermarket and needed a quiet place to sleep during the day, it seemed perfect. From the moment he stepped inside, David felt something was wrong. It wasn't the noise, because the place was so silent it felt lifeless. It wasn't the smell either, even though the room had a faint, musty odor, typical of an old apartment. What unsettled him was the strange sensation that unseen eyes were watching him whenever he was in the living room, especially when he walked past the front door. The feeling was so vague, he convinced himself he was just overtired from lack of sleep. But that night, the first night at 3 in the morning, the feeling stopped being vague. It became something real, solid, and terrifying enough to keep him awake until dawn. After a long, exhausting shift, David returned to his room a little after 1. He showered quickly, lay down, and fell asleep almost immediately. But it didn't last. He woke up to an unusual kind of silence, a silence so deep he could hear his own heartbeat. He checked his phone. The screen lit up. 2:58 a.m. He shut his eyes again, trying to fall back asleep. Then he heard it, a small sound by the front door. A knock, a single dry, sharp tap that made his eyes snap open. He had heard it clearly. It wasn't his imagination. David stayed still, holding his breath, listening. Maybe someone knocked on the wrong door. But at this hour, there was no one else living at the far end of the hall except him. While he was still debating, a second knock sounded, a double tap, calm and deliberate. David's heartbeat sped up. He sat up, placed his feet on the cold floor, and stood. The moment he moved, the third knock came, slower and heavier. Someone was clearly standing right outside his door. David swallowed hard and approached the door. His hand trembled as he reached for the handle, but he didn't open it. Instead, he leaned forward and looked through the peephole. He saw nothing, not an empty hallway, not the dim yellow light from the flickering bulb. He saw pure darkness, a thick black surface filling the entire lens, as if someone were standing so close. Their body blocked the whole view. No human silhouette, no movement, just a void, alive yet motionless. Then something shifted. A slight movement in the dark made David flinch. Whatever it was, pressed even closer against the door, and then he heard it. A whisper, so faint it barely existed. But David felt it vibrate right beside his ear, as if lips were pressed against the crack of the door. "I know you are awake." David's body went numb. He stumbled backward in panic, sweat sliding down his temples, even though the room was cold. He tried to calm himself, searching for any rational explanation. A neighbor, a prank, a thief. But that voice did not sound human. It was thin and stretched, echoing like it rose from a deep, hollow cavern. David backed up until he reached the bed and grabbed his phone to call the landlord, but the signal dropped instantly. He tried turning on the lights. The bulb flickered once and died. The room fell into complete darkness, with only the broken street lamp outside casting a faint pale glow through the curtain. Then came another knock, harder, sharper, another. This time he felt the wood vibrate. Whoever was outside was losing patience. A third knock slammed against the door so violently, David thought it would break open. He covered his head, trying to steady his breathing. Then suddenly everything stopped. No knocking, no whisper, no sound at all. The silence was so complete it drowned his racing heartbeat. 5 seconds passed. 10, a minute, still nothing. Gathering what little courage he had left, David approached the door again. His hand reached for the handle, but this time he didn't look through the peephole. He wanted to open it and end this nightmare. But the moment he turned the handle, a freezing gust blew through the narrow gap, strong enough to make him yank his hand back. David spun toward the window on instinct, and what he saw made his stomach twist. On the glass, blurred by cold moisture, was a handprint, a long, stretched handprint larger than any human hand, with thin fingers and deep claw-like grooves at the tips. The print slowly slid downward, leaving streaks of water that looked like diluted blood. The air grew heavy, thick, like the oxygen had been siphoned from the room. David retreated, fumbling in the darkness for the light switch. He pressed it. The light turned on for 1 second, and in that single second, he saw a figure standing in the middle of the living room, its back facing him. Tall, thin, body twisted, its neck bent at an impossible angle. The light died instantly. The room went black. David froze. He heard no footsteps, no breathing, but he knew something was inside the room with him. A soft voice drifted out from the darkness. "I knocked and you didn't open." Cold air brushed the back of his neck, and David knew it was standing right behind him. David stood frozen in the darkness, his entire body locked in place, ears strained for any sound behind him. He didn't dare turn around. The air around him was unnaturally cold, the kind of cold that felt like a forehead pressed against the back of his neck. It wasn't wind. It wasn't air conditioning. It felt like it was coming from something that no longer carried the warmth of life. The entire room was swallowed in a terrifying silence. No ticking clock, no sound of cars outside, not even the soft brush of wind against the window. The air felt stopped, sealed, as if something had smothered every bit of movement. The darkness grew thick, almost physical. Then a breath slid across the back of David's neck, slow, deep, so cold that it sent pins of ice running down his spine. David jerked violently and spun around, acting on pure instinct. But no one was there. No twisted figure with a broken neck, no unnatural eyes, no shadowy shape. Only darkness, dense, suffocating darkness. He backed up until he felt the wall behind him, his fingers shaking as they searched for the light switch. The moment he found it, he slammed it up. The lights came on again, this time brighter and steadier. The room was completely empty. No figure, no disturbance, nothing proving anything had happened at all. If the long, distorted handprint on the window wasn't still there, David might have believed he had been dreaming. He breathed heavily, trying to steady his pulse, which now thudded wildly in his ears. It felt like he had just woken from a nightmare he hadn't actually been sleeping through. Something had stood in the room with him. David slowly approached the window. The handprint was drying, but still clearly visible. The fingers were long. The bones seemed stretched. The nails sharp enough to leave faint dents in the glass. Under the room light, the print didn't reflect like moisture. It looked darker, heavier, as if made from something not meant to come from a human being. A shiver ran down his spine as he pulled the curtain closed, and at that exact moment, a knock hit the door. A sharp, forceful knock that made David flinch. Another pair of knocks quickly followed. 2 rapid strikes, impatient and urgent. He stepped toward the door and looked through the peephole. This time, he could see the hallway. The hallway light flickered sickly yellow, but it wasn't the pitch-black void from earlier, and there was no one standing in front of the door. The corridor was empty, stretching out like an endless tunnel. David took a deep breath. Maybe the sound had come from another room, maybe an echo. He tried to feed himself these reasonable explanations, but his heartbeat still pulsed hard with unease, until, right as he stared through the peephole, the hallway light suddenly went out. The entire corridor fell into complete darkness. David stepped back instantly, and then, from the other side of the door, through only a thin layer of wood, came a soft laugh, a quiet, shaky, breathy laugh, the kind of laugh someone makes when they are trying to hold it back but can't hide how delighted they are. A laugh so unnatural it made David's veins feel like they froze. He didn't go near the door. He didn't speak. He barely breathed. The laugh lasted only a few seconds, but that was enough to push him into panic. When it stopped, the hallway fell silent again, utterly silent. David backed toward the table and grabbed the desk lamp like a weapon. The door stayed still. The room stayed still. The silence was worse than all the knocking. He hesitated for several minutes before making a decision. Part of him screamed not to open the door, but another part, driven by a desperate need to confirm that the nightmare was over, pushed him forward. David turned the handle. The door creaked open slowly, the sound slicing into the silence. The hallway was empty. The ceiling light flickered weakly, but the cold heaviness in the air and the sensation of being watched clung to him like mist. David stepped outside. He looked right. No one. He looked left. Still no one. But when he looked down, his stomach dropped. On the gray tile floor, right in front of his door, was a footprint. A long, blackened footprint. Not human. The toes were twice as long as normal. The nails curved like claws and pressed deep into the tile. And the footprint wasn't pointing outward. It was pointing inward, meaning whatever left it had stepped out of his room, not into it. David sucked in a sharp breath, stumbled back inside, and slammed the door shut. He pressed his back against it, heart pounding wildly. His thoughts spun out of control. Something had been inside his room before he woke up, and the knocks were not trying to come in. They were trying to call him out. David switched on the room light again. The light was softer now, but steady. When he looked back at the floor, the footprint vanished the moment he blinked. The spot where it had been was now completely clean. Was he imagining it? His mind exhausted, his senses playing tricks. The door lock rattled gently behind him. David spun around. No one was touching the handle, but the lock turned slightly, as if someone outside had just tried to open it. Then a whisper came, clear, close, only inches from the door. "I am still here." David froze when the whisper seeped through the crack of the door. The sound was quiet, but sharp enough to stab straight into his eardrum, sending a cold shiver through his entire body. The air in the room felt dense and unmoving. Every bit of warmth had been drained from the space, leaving behind a chill so deep it reached into his bones. He stepped back once, then again, his eyes locked on the door. The whisper had stopped, but its presence lingered in the room like an invisible gaze pressing on him from every direction. David had no idea how long he remained there. It could have been seconds. It could have been minutes. Time felt distorted, stretched thin as if someone were crushing it in their fist. He needed to do something, call the police. But how would he explain what had just happened? Something knocking at 3 in the morning, something whispering through the door. They would think he was hallucinating or high on something. David inhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. He approached the door again, gripping the desk lamp like a makeshift weapon. He pressed his ear against the surface, trying to listen. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing, only absolute silence. He reached for the lock to make sure it was secured, but the moment his fingers touched the latch, it turned slightly on its own, shifting to the left as if someone outside had tried to open it. David jerked back in shock, stumbling away from the door. The latch stopped at the exact moment he jumped, as if whoever was outside knew he was watching. Then a single knock hit the metal latch, not the wood, not the center of the door. The knock landed directly on the lock, as if the thing outside were testing every part of the door, every nail, every joint, searching for its weak point. David's hands trembled as he grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it at the door. The bright beam lit the wood surface, but nothing looked abnormal. He stepped closer, pressing the lamp to the edge of the frame, trying to spot any gap. Nothing. No shadow. No movement. He tried to push the door open. It didn't move. It felt like someone outside was gripping the handle, or worse, gripping the bottom edge of the door, holding it shut with inhuman strength. David tried again, pulling hard. The door rattled slightly but stayed firmly shut. He pulled again, stronger this time, using all his weight. The door moved only 2 centimeters before being yanked back into place by whatever was holding it. It felt exactly like a cold, clawed hand was hooked onto the edge. Panic flooded David's chest. He spun around, ran to the table, and grabbed the wooden leg he had unscrewed earlier. His hands shook violently, but his movements grew desperate. He rushed back to the door, determined to force it open. But the instant his hand touched the handle, a massive force slammed into the door from the outside. The impact flung the door inward and threw David backward, sending him crashing onto the cold tile floor. The door swung open about 20 centimeters, not enough for anything to walk in, but enough for darkness from the hallway to spill inside like thick black smoke. The hallway was pitch dark. The overhead light was dead. A freezing draft poured into his face. David pushed himself up, eyes fixed on the narrow gap. His palms were icy and drenched with sweat. Then he heard it, a slow, dragging sound. A scraping noise like long nails gliding across tile. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It wasn't coming from beyond the door. It came from under him. David snapped his gaze downward, his heart exploding in his chest. From beneath the door, a long, blackened object slid into view. A finger, not a human finger. Twice as long, thin, the skin stretched tight like it would tear. The tip ended in a sharp, claw-like point. The finger hooked into the tile and pulled its arm further inside. Then came more. Part of a hand, then the wrist, thin and bony, then an arm so long and unnatural it could not belong to anything living in this world. The arm shoved the door wider, opening it more, letting in more darkness, more cold. David stumbled backward, gripping the wooden leg, though he could hardly feel his own hands. He stared in horror as the arm reached further inside. Then a face appeared, a long, pale face stretched unnaturally, like human skin pulled too tight. Its eyes were deep black hollows with no pupils, no shine. Its mouth was split nearly to the ears, curling upward into a monstrous grin. Its head tilted sideways as it squeezed through the gap, and it spoke in a low, echoing voice that sounded like it crawled up from a deep pit. "You opened the door faster this time," David screamed and sprinted toward the corner of the room. But before he could get up, the creature reached one of its unnaturally long arms toward the lock. It closed the door. From the inside, two soft clicks sounded as the lock turned. It had locked the door, and in that instant, David understood the horrifying truth. The thing was no longer outside. It was inside the room with him. David froze in the corner of the room, his back pressed so hard against the wall it felt like moving even an inch would cause whatever was left of his world to collapse. The room was no longer a place of safety. It had become a sealed box, a trap with no exits, and inside it was the thing that had just locked the door from the inside. The dim glow from the desk lamp lit only a small patch of the room. Everything else was swallowed by thick, heavy darkness. From the direction of the door, the creature's shadow stretched long across the floor, warped and twitching with every tiny movement it made. The air had weight like cold fog that seeped into his skin. David could barely feel his fingertips. The creature still stood there, half its body pressed flat against the door, the other half already slipped into the room. Its deep black eyes drifted across the space, not searching, but smelling his fear. Every time David's heart thudded, the creature tilted its head slightly, pleased, entertained. It opened its mouth as its lips peeled apart. David heard a wet tearing sound. Krrr. Like skin pulled too far, like bones cracking quietly. Its voice came out not as one voice, but as dozens, layered, whispering together. "You closed the door." That was the right thing to do. David gripped the piece of broken wood in his hand, but his muscles were trembling so violently he could barely lift it. His voice cracked. "What do you want?" The creature tilted its head almost 90 degrees, its long neck snapping like rotten wood. Then it smiled, a smile impossibly wide, the edges splitting farther open, revealing thick black fluid inside, like tar. "Not trying. to get in. It crawled forward another half step, fingers scraping across the tiles. I've always been in here. The world inside David's skull seemed to implode. Air shrank in his lungs. Always been here. Not tonight, not when it knocked, but long before. David remembered the tiny rattling under the bed when he napped, the sinking of the mattress when he lay alone, the dark shapes at the edges of his vision, the breaths he chalked up to damp air. Not stress, not imagination, not dreams. It was real. The creature's shoulders shifted like it was savoring his realization. Then it stepped fully out of the dark. Except it didn't step. It crawled on all fours, every joint bent the wrong way, limbs stretched far too long, moving like a giant spider forced into human shape. Its fingers hit the floor before its knees did, each claw tapping the tiles with a sharp, nerve-grating click. David's back pressed harder into the corner. No space to run, no window large enough to escape. Nothing in the room could stop it. The creature moved closer to the cone of light, and when the light hit it, David's breath caught painfully. Its skin wasn't smooth. It wasn't human. Wasn't any animal he knew. The skin was dry, cracked like dehydrated earth, with deep fissures running all over, and beneath those cracks, something pulsed, like faint breath, thin, dark veins glowing dim red, like burning embers. Not skin, not meat, something stitched together, barely holding a human shape. It stopped just 2 meters away, tilted its face toward the warm lamplight, as if proudly displaying what it truly was. David raised the wooden stick, but he knew if it wanted, half a second was enough. The creature smiled again. "Tonight, I want you to see more clearly." It extended one long arm toward David, not to strike, but to point under the bed. "You know," it whispered. "That's my favorite place to lie." David's eyes shot toward the dark gap under the bed, pitch black. But in that moment, he saw 2 white eyes staring back. Not the creature's eyes, not the same shape, not the same glow. Someone else, something else. David's throat closed. His legs nearly gave out. What is under there?" The creature's grin widened. It slid to the side, revealing the gap even more. "I'm not the only thing that lives here," it whispered, voice layered with 100 echoes. "The person before you knew that too." David screamed and stumbled backward, hitting the table leg. The lamp fell. Crash! Darkness swallowed the room. Instant, absolute. And in that darkness, the sound of fast crawling under the bed, something scraping the floor, a small giggling laugh, childlike, but wrong, broken, warped like a child's voice, echoing through metal. David scrambled blindly, hands searching for anything to defend himself. But the room filled with chaos, nails dragging along the wall, the floor vibrating faintly, dozens of sharp taps, like fingers drumming all across the tiles. Then suddenly, a cold hand clamped around his ankle. The freezing hand clamped around David's ankle so suddenly that his entire body locked up. The cold was not human. It was damp, slick, like the skin of something that lived underground in rot and soil, and the long fingers tightened around his flesh as if testing how soft the prey was. For a fraction of a second, David's mind shut down. He could no longer feel his own body. All he could grasp was one horrifying truth. The thing under the bed was not the same creature crawling near the doorway. This was something else. Something deeper, something even worse. David screamed, the sound tearing out of his throat as he kicked wildly. But the pull was so strong that his whole body jerked backward, slamming his head against the edge of the bed. The room was pitch black. He couldn't see anything but shifting shadows, yet he felt the cold claws dragging him under. His hands flailed against the floor, searching for anything he could grip. His fingers brushed the bedpost, then the edge of a drawer. He snatched the broken table leg and dragged it close like the last anchor keeping him from whatever hell was opening beneath him. The force pulling him down was monstrous, as if 2 or 3 hands were grabbing him at once, each one clawing deeper into his ankle. The air from under the bed rushed up into his face, icy and foul, carrying the smell of mold, wet soil, and something sweet and rotten like decaying flesh. "Let go," David shouted, his voice cracking with panic. But the thing under the bed did not let go. It laughed, a thin, trembling laugh, childlike, but warped so horribly that David's ears buzzed with pain. "Come down here." David felt 10 claws digging into his skin, sinking deeper. He felt the heat of torn flesh, the sting, the burn. Blood began to seep down his ankle. He pulled back with everything he had. The table leg creaked in his grip, ready to snap. Through the chaos, the long creature standing near the door, the one watching him earlier, lowered itself and stared toward the bed with its hollow black eyes. It smiled faintly. "Oh, it chose you," it whispered, like someone observing a ritual. David stammered, shaking violently. "What is that thing?" The creature tilted its head, crawling closer on elongated limbs. "That thing has been here far longer than I have," it said in its low, echoing voice. "It has been hungry for a very long time." The words froze David's blood. He tightened his grip on the table leg until the wood groaned. The pull from under the bed suddenly intensified. David's body lurched forward. He slid almost a full meter. His hips were now touching the underside of the bed frame. In the darkness, he felt multiple breaths, thin, shaky, whisper-like, drifting over his legs, like dozens of children whispering in a sealed room. He knew if it dragged him just a little farther, he would be gone, completely gone, and there was no telling where the space under that bed really led. Not a gap of a few inches, but somewhere else, somewhere deep. "A pit!" David screamed so loud his vision blurred. He swung the table leg downward with all his strength, smashing it into the spot where the claws were hooked into his skin. A crack rang out, not wood breaking, bone. A roar burst from beneath the bed, shaking the entire room. It was not human. It was not animal. It was a layered shriek, as if dozens of throats screamed in unison. The grip loosened for one single second, but that second was enough. David twisted his body, rolled sideways, and tore himself free from the black claw claws. He slid across the floor, breathless, slamming into the wall so hard his neck stung. Pain shot through his leg. He looked down 3 deep gashes from the claws carved across his skin. Blood welled up. The bruising had already begun, but the shape did not resemble a human grip. David forced himself upright. The tall, stretched creature at the door was now standing only a few steps from him. It didn't attack. It simply widened its pale, elongated face into a satisfied grin. "You made it angry." David raised the broken table leg, panting. "What do you want?" The creature crawled sideways, clearing the path to the front door as if offering him a choice. "You can run," it said, its white eyes flickering under the dim light. "But it will follow." The creature pointed one long, bony finger toward the bed. "I am only the gatekeeper, but it is the one that truly lives in this room." Then the creature retreated into a dark corner, opening the path to escape. David limped, wincing from the pain, and rushed toward the door. His hands frantically twisted the lock. It clicked open. He yanked the door with all his strength. Just as the door opened, a sound rose from under the bed, a low, growling moan like a wolf with a torn throat mixed with the wailing of a child. "Do not go." A long, black arm lunged out from under the bed, shooting toward him at terrifying speed. David bolted out of the room. The door slammed shut behind him. The hallway was completely dark. The air was freezing. David turned to look back. Room 304 was silent. No knocking, no whispering, no scraping, but from beneath the doorway, a thick black substance began oozing out, slow, heavy, almost alive, like blood, like ink, like something leaking out of a bottomless pit. David stepped back. Whatever lived inside that room had not stopped. David stood trembling in the pitch-black hallway, his back pressed against the freezing wall. His breath came in short, broken bursts, each inhale feeling like 1,000 needles stabbing into his lungs. The pain from the claw marks around his ankle had begun spreading up his calf. The dark, bruised grooves pulsed with a burning ache. Room 304. The room he had just escaped from sat closed and silent. No scraping, no whispering, no twisted laughter, only the thick black liquid continuing to seep slowly from the bottom of the door, oozing out as if it were watching him. David inhaled sharply, each breath shredding his chest. He backed away step by step, eyes never leaving the door, the sickening feeling that something inside was standing right against the door, listening to every heartbeat and every trembling breath, nearly made him break down in tears. He could not stay here. He could not stand still. He could not go back. His whole body shook so violently his legs almost buckled, but the terror of being dragged back into that room forced him to run. The hallway stretched ahead of him, long and cold, its final light flickering weakly like a dying hospital bulb. The air tasted metallic. David took a shaky step back, then turned and ran. His footsteps echoed loud and sharp, ringing along the tile floor like coffin knocks. Every step sent a spike of pain through his leg, but adrenaline shoved him forward like a hunted animal. He made it only a few meters before the hallway stretched. Not a trick of the light, not a hallucination. The hallway physically grew longer. The staircase that should have been only seconds away seemed to slip further and further from reach, stretching like a rubber band pulled by invisible hands. Every time he moved, the far end of the hall slid backward, retreating from him. David's panic exploded. No, 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 stop it! His voice echoed into the empty corridor, but was swallowed instantly by darkness. No echo, no return. It was as if sound itself was being smothered. He turned back. Room 304 still sat at the far end of the hall, but what froze him wasn't the door. It was the shadow standing in front of it. A tall, impossibly thin silhouette, its neck bent sideways at an unnatural angle. No face, no features, only a smear of darkness, like a blot of ink painted onto reality. It didn't move, but every time the hallway light flickered, it stood a little closer. David let out a broken cry and ran harder. His calf screamed with pain. His breath rasped in his throat, but survival instinct drowned out everything else. He didn't dare look back, didn't dare slow down, didn't dare imagine that thing closing in. Only run, run or die. But the hallway still did not end. He ran dozens of steps, then dozens more. The staircase mere meters away before would not come closer. The pale, flickering light remained frozen in place like a broken video frame. The hallway was warped, bent, stretched by something, stretched by it. David's legs buckled. He almost collapsed. But the instant he slowed down, the shadow behind him stopped as well. A cold breath drifted across the back of his neck. Footsteps, but not human footsteps. A scraping shuffle across tile, claws dragging, slow, steady, approaching. David spun around, and for the first time in his life, he felt his heart stop. At the end of the hall, near the door of room 304, the thin creature from before crawled out from the darkness. Its long limbs twisted at broken angles like a spider. Its deep black eyes glowed like pits swallowing the light around them. It said nothing. It just smiled. Its mouth stretched to the sides of its head, revealing rows of long, ash-black teeth. Then it began to crawl. Fast, very fast. Its hands slapped against the tile with a loud, dry crack, and its body lunged forward like it was being yanked by ropes. The dragging claws grew louder and faster until they blended into one shrill, screeching sound. David screamed and ran. No thoughts left, no planning, only pure terror. His breath burned hot, but the air behind him grew colder and colder, like the creature was slithering just under the surface of the hallway darkness. Stop! The voice stretched and warped, as if coming through layers of bent metal. It didn't just come from the creature. It came from the walls, from the floor, from the ceiling. The hallway itself was speaking. David's foot slipped. He crashed to the ground, his head striking tile. His ears rang. His vision spun. Pain surged up his leg. He tried to stand, but the shadow was already behind him. A long, black hand clamped onto his shoulder. The grip was so strong he felt claws pierce through fabric and stab into skin. David screamed, trying desperately to pry the hand off, but the strength wasn't human. The creature lowered its mouth beside his ear. Its breath was icy and stale, like the air from a sealed crypt. "You cannot run. This house has belonged to us for a long time." David kicked off the wall, throwing himself forward and slipping out of its grasp. His toes scraped the floor painfully, but he didn't stop. He had to reach the stairs. He had to get out. He had to escape the building. The hallway still stretched. But then, during one flicker of light, he saw it. The stairs were back in the right place, just ahead. He lunged toward them like a madman. Behind him came the violent scraping of claws gaining speed, the vibrating floor, the laughter, the whispering, "Come here, hurry." David reached the stair rail, and in that exact second, a different hand shot up from beneath the stairs and wrapped around his throat. The hand gripping David's throat from beneath the staircase was so cold, it felt like frozen metal clamped against his skin. The fingers dug in long, bony, each joint cracking softly as they tightened. David choked. The air crushed out of his lungs. A sudden wave of suffocation slammed into him, forcing a desperate, strangled gasp from his throat. "No, no." He clawed at the hand, but the strength behind it was nothing human. His eyes reddened, vision blurring as oxygen drained away. The world around him narrowed to a dark tunnel, and the grinding sound of his own neck bones under pressure. In that moment, David looked down under the stairs, and he saw it. A face but warped, crushed flat, as if it had been smashed and then pulled back into shape. Its skin was rough, rotted, blackened like decaying leather stretched over a skull. The eyes were huge, white, empty. Its mouth took up half its face, filled with long, jagged teeth stained pitch black, with thick, syrupy drool dripping in dark trails. But the mouth did not open like a human mouth. It tore sideways, ripping wider, revealing a deep black void inside, not a throat, not a mouth of flesh, but an opening to somewhere else. A whisper leaked out from that widening tear. "Go down." David was moments from passing out. But those two words, those horrifying words, snapped his mind awake in pure terror. "Go down." It was not a threat, not a command. It was an invitation, as if beneath the staircase wasn't just the first floor, but something deeper, a pit, a void waiting for him. With the last strength in his body, David slammed his foot into the creature's face. The impact made its grip loosen just enough for David to rip himself free. Air surged painfully into his lungs, and he collapsed onto the railing. Coughing violently, the creature howled a deep, layered roar as if several throats screamed at once. The sound hammered against David's skull. It didn't climb up, but its eyes brightened like it was enjoying the struggle. David didn't wait. He bolted down the staircase. Each step jolted the wounds on his ankle, the 3 claw marks now bleeding freely again. Warm blood ran down his foot. leaving faint red footprints across the moldy tile. The first floor hallway was darker than the one above. The ceiling lights no longer flickered. They were completely dead. David stopped for just a second. He could see nothing. The darkness wasn't normal. It was thick, heavy, swallowing everything like the inside of a giant mouth. He switched on his phone flashlight. A narrow cone of light cut into the dark, and in that moment, David realized something was terribly wrong. The first floor didn't look normal anymore. The walls were cracked, tiles ripped up, the ceiling sagged as if claws had torn at it from inside. Long black handprints stained the walls, reaching upward, clawing, failing to escape. David instinctively stepped backward, but a scraping sound behind him froze his blood. The creature from upstairs was coming down, fast, very fast. It scraped across the railing, slammed into walls as it changed direction, all of it so close. David felt vibrations through the floor. He sprinted into the hallway, not knowing where he was going, only knowing he had to keep moving. Room 101, 102, 103. All doors shut, no lights, no voices, like the building was abandoned, and he was the only one left alive. Room 105 had a crack in the door. In blind desperation, David dove inside and slammed the door behind him, twisting the lock with trembling hands. The room was pitch dark. He raised the flashlight and swept it across the space. Room 105 didn't look lived in. Furniture overturned, walls covered in claw marks, the floor scarred with long drag marks as if someone had been pulled by the head across the room, and black stains everywhere drying into vein-like streaks along the tile, identical to the substance leaking from room 304. David realized the truth. He wasn't the first to run. Someone else had tried hiding here and failed. He collapsed against the wall, clutching his chest, trying to steady his breathing. His heartbeat was a wild drumbeat in his ears. His head spun with terror, pain, exhaustion. The scraping stopped. No more crawling, no footsteps, no breathing, no cracking joints. David held his breath. Maybe it didn't follow him in here. He raised the light and shined it toward the door to check the lock. And then a whisper breathed directly against his ear, freezing his spine solid. "You picked the wrong room." David snapped his head around. No one was there. But the voice didn't come from the hallway, didn't come from upstairs. It came from inside room 105. His flashlight trembled. His fingers turned numb. He aimed the beam at the darkest corner of the room between the two collapsed cabinets. The light landed on a figure standing there, a man wearing pajamas. But his face was ruined, no longer resembling anything human. His skull was bent to one side. His left eye hung loose, dangling by a nerve. His mouth had been torn open from the inside and stitched crudely with black thread. He stared at David, but the eyes did not move. Only the mouth did, not opening horizontally, opening vertically, ripping wider down toward his chest, revealing a long, black gash. A different voice, not the man's, spoke from within that torn mouth. "It is behind you." David whipped around instantly. A long, black arm was reaching down from the ceiling, its claws only inches above his head. The hand hanging down from the ceiling hovered only centimeters above David's head, its long fingers dangling in front of him like glossy black blades. The skin on the hand was thin and stretched, like the hide of a corpse left to rot barely enough to cover the dark veins running along the bones. The fingertips curled like rusted hooks, each one as sharp as an iron spike. David froze, every muscle locked in place. The cold seeping from those claws pressed directly onto his face, raising a wave of goosebumps down his neck. His throat tightened, trapping every sound he tried to make. He attempted to step back, but his spine was already pressed against the door of room 105. There was nowhere left to go. The hand on the ceiling moved, not gently, not slowly. It jerked violently, as if the creature was wrenching its entire body through the crack above. A cracking sound snapped through the room like old wood bending under pressure. But it was not wood. It was bone, its own bones breaking and reshaping to force itself through the ceiling. Then a face pushed through, not the twisted man from earlier, not the long, thin creature that had chased him through the hall. This was a third one, a face stripped of all skin, leaving nothing but purple flesh and exposed tendons. Silver-white eyes bulged from their sockets, unblinking. Its teeth were jagged and mismatched, as if every tooth had once shattered and grown back wrong. Its jaw opened so wide the chin nearly touched its chest. Thick black drool dripped down, splattering onto the floor in front of David. Its voice scraped out like a snapped violin string. "Come here!" David screamed, rolling to the side as the hand stabbed down. The claws punched straight through the tile, leaving a deep hole and a sticky black smear like congealed blood. He scrambled back, palms slipping on the floor as he tried to stand. But the creature didn't stop. Another hand pushed through, then a leg, then half its torso dropped out of the ceiling like a spider shedding its shell. David lunged toward the only window in the room. He unlocked it, grabbed the frame, and pulled, but it wouldn't budge. It was stuck from the outside. Something was holding it shut. David gasped, sweat breaking across his skin. There was no exit. Behind him, the third creature hit the floor with a heavy, wet thud like a sack of meat thrown from a height. Its limbs twitched, then stretched out fully like a beast waking from sleep. Its head bent backward a full 180 degrees, staring straight at David. Then, slowly, it twisted its entire torso around to face him, not by turning its neck, but by rotating its whole body like a bent puppet. David ran for the door. He twisted the lock, pulled. The door opened a crack, but immediately slammed shut again with crushing force, nearly shredding his fingers. Not the wind, not the creature in the room, because outside the door of room 105, there was nothing. No hallway, no walls, no lights, no rooms, only pitch blackness. A void. David staggered back, eyes wide. The building was twisting around him, or he had fallen into another layer of reality. Behind him came the sound of meat dragging. The third creature was halfway across the room. David made the only choice left. He hid, He dove under the bed, the same bed where he had nearly been dragged to his death earlier, but now it was his only chance. He threw his phone into the opposite corner, letting the light distract whatever was coming, and crawled straight into the cold darkness beneath the frame. The air under the bed was so cold it felt like sticking his face into a winter well. The smell of rotting dirt, damp wood, and dried blood hit hard enough to make him gag. David clamped his hand over his mouth, pressing himself against the wall. He heard the creature reach the bed, sniffing, scraping claws across the tiles. A childlike giggle. David shut his eyes tight. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't shake. If it realized he was under here. A dragging noise scraped right beside his ear, and he nearly blacked out. The creature bent down, lowering its face toward the gap beneath the bed. He felt its silver eyes sweeping across the darkness. Then it whispered in a low, rasping voice, "Oh, I know this place." David's heart hammered so hard he thought it would burst. "You should not crawl under here," it whispered, voice stretched with amusement. "This belongs to it." David almost screamed. It! Another one! How many things were living in this building? Suddenly, the space beneath the bed trembled, as if something under the floorboards was breathing. David froze. It wasn't his imagination. There was breathing, slow, deep, massive, like something huge and ancient was sleeping just beneath the floor, only inches beneath him. The third creature suddenly pulled away, terrified. It let out a strange sound, not a roar, not a growl, but something like begging. It woke up. It woke up. It backed toward the doorway. Then, from beneath the bed, a sound echoed. Knock! David's entire body turned to ice. That knock, the same knock from 3 in the morning, the knock that followed him. But now it came from directly under him. Knock! Knock. Knock! The third creature shrieked like its throat tore open. It flung itself at the wall, squeezed through the gap of blackness outside the door, and vanished into the void as if swallowed whole. David scrambled backward, heart exploding in his chest. The knocks grew louder. The floor began to crack. A black vein spread outward beneath the tiles, like something pulsing from below. Then a whisper rose from directly under the bed. Now, it's your turn. The sound of knock, knock, knock hammered from beneath the wooden floor of room 105, freezing every muscle in David's body. The air beneath the bed grew colder by several degrees. His skin prickled, every hair on his arms standing straight, as if a surge of static ran through him. The dim light from the phone he had thrown into the corner flickered weakly, but under the bed where he was curled up, the darkness was so thick it swallowed the light completely. "No, please don't," David whispered, his voice trembling until the words broke apart. But the knocking didn't stop. It grew stronger, more deliberate, as if something beneath the floor was knocking in rhythm, calling him, not to scare him, not to chase him, but as a signal, a reply, a sign that his time to meet it had come. The floor shuddered softly, a deep, even vibration, like the heartbeat of something massive lying right beneath the rotten wood. David clutched his head, shutting his eyes tight, praying it was just panic until the knock sounded again, right next to his ear. Knock! Knock, knock, as if it was only millimeters away. David choked on his breath. He couldn't stay hidden anymore. He had to get out from under the bed. He scrambled backward, pushing off the floor, and then the knocking changed. It morphed into a cracking sound, like rotten wood being forced upward from below. David peeked through the gap under the bed. He saw the floor bulge. A round section of wood lifted upward, as if something underneath was pushing hard against it. Cracks split across the planks, widening fast. Fragments of wood popped loose one by one, flipping upward like the lips of a stitched mouth being ripped open after years sealed shut. From the thin cracks, thick black sludge oozed through like boiling tar, releasing a nauseating stench. David scrambled out from under the bed, slamming his back into the cabinet so hard his vision blurred. No, no, no. As soon as he rolled away, a single sharp black finger pierced the floorboards. Then a second finger. Then an entire massive hand clamped onto the surface, joints cracking loudly as it hauled itself upward. David staggered to his feet, staring in horror as the nightmare unfolded. The floor was opening, not splintering, not collapsing, opening like the jaws of a living creature, its edges curling upward into a grotesque arc, and inside was a pit of pure darkness, not the empty space beneath a floor, but a void with no bottom. A voice rose from within it, not loud, not soft, but cutting straight through David's flesh and bone. "I wait," David screamed, bolting for the door. He slammed his fist against it, twisted the lock, yanked the handle. But room 105 no longer led to the hallway. It opened to a black wall, cold, solid, no gap, no handle. He spun around. The room was warping. The ceiling rose and fell like a massive lung, inhaling and exhaling. The walls pulsed and curved. The carpet had turned into a sheet of clammy skin threaded with branching dark veins. His phone light flickered like it was dying, but the worst thing was his shadow on the wall. It no longer looked human. It was taller, thinner, its neck bent sideways, and the shadow of its hand had one extra finger. David backed away, shaking so violently he could hardly hold his breath. Meanwhile, the thing beneath the floor had pulled half its body into the room, a swollen mass of cold flesh, trembling and dripping black fluid, loose joints bending wrong, bones twisting like wet rope. And, in the center of its mangled torso, a face slowly formed. A face that looked like his. David's terror peaked. He understood. It was copying him, stealing his shape, using his blood as a pattern. His ankle throbbed painfully. He could feel where his blood had stained its claws. "No, please," David whispered, stumbling toward the opposite corner. The creature let out a thick, wet swallow, then spoke in a warped voice that sounded like a whisper rising from deep water. Too late. It planted its massive hand on the edge of the floor and dragged its entire body upward. It now stood nearly half the height of the room. Dark streaks pulsed beneath its skin like parasites crawling. A gaping mouth opened in its chest, a bottomless pit. From inside that mouth, A child's laughter echoed. David frantically looked around for anything to defend himself. His eyes landed on the broken wooden frame of a drawer. He grabbed it, raising it like a weapon, but before he could swing, the door to room 105 slammed hard from the outside. "Open up," a human voice. A man, clear, alive. David spun around, stunned. Someone else was here. He ran to the door and twisted the lock. The door burst open. Bright hallway light flooded in, and the hallway was normal again. Not stretched, not warped, not dark. It was the real hallway. Standing outside was a middle-aged man wearing a thick coat, holding a flashlight and a can of pepper spray. His face was pale, but his terrified eyes showed he had also been running from something. He gasped for breath. You're still alive. Hurry, get out, now." David couldn't even respond before the man grabbed his wrist and yanked him out. The moment the door to room 105 slammed shut behind them, a thunderous roar exploded from inside, shaking the entire hallway. David stumbled into the wall. The man clamped a hand over his mouth. "Quiet! It can still hear you." David's heart pounded like it would burst, but he still forced out a whisper. Who are you?" That thing inside the room. The man swallowed hard, then met David's eyes with raw fear. "I'm the one who rented room 105 before you." David froze at the man's words. "I am the one who rented room 105 before you." The air around them seemed to stop. The hallway was so quiet. David could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his chest. The weak hallway light flickered, casting a sickly glow over the man's exhausted, terrified face. Before David could say anything, the man tightened his grip on David's wrist and yanked him forward. "Come with me. We can't stay here. It follows the scent very fast." David stumbled after him, his injured leg throbbing with every step. They moved down the hallway toward the far end. David glanced back once. The door to room 105 was still shut, but from the gap beneath it, that thick black substance was still slowly crawling out as if it were alive. He swallowed hard, his voice shaking. Do you know what is happening?" It has been attacking me since 3 in the morning." The man did not answer right away. His breathing was heavy, but he did not slow down. "If it has already touched you." He glanced briefly at the claw marks on David's leg. Then it will not let go. But you are still lucky." "Lucky?" David stared in disbelief. "I almost died in the floor, and that thing fell from the ceiling." "Not it," the man cut in, his voice tight. "What you saw are just satellites, things that cling to this house like parasites. They hunt, but they follow the orders of something else." A chill ran down David's spine. He had lowered his voice on the words "something else," like just saying them might call it closer. "What thing?" David asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man looked him straight in the eyes. "The one that knocks at 3 in the morning." David's chest tightened. "You think it is outside the door?" the man said bitterly. "No, it is under the floor, under the building. It sleeps during the day, but 3 is when it wakes up to look for something new." David shuddered. They stopped in front of room 112, the last room, tucked into the darkest corner of the hallway. The man fumbled with a key, unlocked the door, and pulled David inside. The room was dark. But unlike the others, nothing here was warped. No black stains, no claw marks. It felt more like a temporary shelter than a place to live. The man quickly locked the door, then slid a homemade metal bar into place. "It is safer in here," he said between breaths. David looked around. The walls were covered in notes and scraps of paper, strange symbols, rough sketches of long hands, mouths opening in the floor, eyes staring through door cracks. The air felt heavy, pressing against his lungs. I thought you were dead," David stammered. The man laughed softly, but there was no humor in it, only something bitter and broken. "I did die," he said, "but it gave me back." David's throat went dry. The man rolled up his sleeve. Underneath, deep black gouges ran along his arm like old claw marks. But the skin had not healed like human skin. It bulged in places, with dark lines pulsing beneath it, as if it did not quite belong to his body. "The day I moved in," he said, "it knocked on my door too, just like it did with you, just like it has done with everyone who rents room 304. David jerked. "I stayed in 304 first, before I ran down to 105. The man nodded. 304 is the entrance, its main doorway. The other rooms are where the parasites nest. But 304 is the mouth." Cold spread through David's chest. The man continued. "That night, I heard the knocking at 3 in the morning. I opened the door. No one in the hallway. But when I turned back inside, I saw it standing in the middle of the room, not in human shape, not like the others. It was a shadow with a mouth as wide as a well." David felt sick. "After that, I ran, and the parasites chased me, not because they were hungry." His eyes darkened. "They wanted to drag me back to it." David swallowed hard. "So you escaped?" The man shook his head slowly. "No one escapes. It just spit me out." David frowned. "Spit you out? What does that mean?" The man did not answer at once. He lifted his shirt higher. The skin on his torso was no longer human. It was black and glossy, like melted plastic. Cracks split across it, and what lay beneath was not red muscle, but dense, black flesh. "Because I didn't fit," he said, voice trembling. "It dragged me down. It tried to wear me." David nearly vomited. "But it discarded me because I was damaged, contaminated by the old parasites. My arm." He raised his left arm. It trembled slightly. "Aunt still listens to it sometimes." David instinctively took a step back. "It chose you," the man said quietly. "When it knocked, it was calling your name. And the others did not appear to kill you. They appeared to filter you." David's whole body shook. "Then what do I do?" he asked. "Do you know how to get out?" The man looked down, then back into David's eyes. "There is a way." He took a long breath, each word straining. "But you have to go down." David stared. "Down. Below. Are you insane?" "I almost got dragged under." "Exactly." The man's voice cracked. "But it will not let you run. It does not let anyone run. You will have to go down by your own choice. The only difference is..." He pointed at David's chest, right where his heart was pounding. "You have to go down there before it drags you." David could not breathe. "Why?" He choked. The man stepped closer, whispering, "Because only if you go willingly, You can speak to it. You might have a chance to bargain. His eyes narrowed. But if you let it drag you down, it will tear you apart to see what is inside. David collapsed to the floor. His hands shook uncontrollably. He could not seem to pull air into his lungs. The man pressed on, speaking faster now. You have its mark. That means you already have a doorway. You don't have to wait for 3 hours. You are already tagged. David looked at his leg. The claw marks were turning darker, spreading outward. Thin black veins began crawling up his calf. He screamed, "No, I am not going down there. You can't make me." The man grabbed his shoulders and shook him. "Listen to me. If you do not go, it will come here. It will open the building. It will swallow all of us." David shoved him away. "I don't believe you. Why should I trust anything you say?" The man sucked in a hard breath, then said something David never expected to hear in his life. "What do you think I have been doing watching you for the last 2 weeks?" David flinched. "You were watching me." The man nodded. "I heard the knocking in your room every night. I saw its shadow standing at the door of 304, and I knew. The night you opened the door and looked out, you had been chosen." David's face went pale. "You knew. And you didn't warn me." The man's jaw clenched, his eyes filling with a wild, exhausted terror. "If you knew too soon, you would have tried to run, and then it would have taken you even faster. I have seen too many people die in this place." He broke down crying, not from guilt, but from terror worn down over years. David stood there, frozen, panicked, helpless, and then knock. David swayed. That sound, that familiar sound. It wasn't coming from beneath the floor of room 105. It wasn't from the ceiling. It rang out right outside the door of room 112. Knock, knock, knock. The man clapped his hand over David's mouth, signaling him to stay silent. But David could feel it. That knocking was not just sound. It was calling his name. Knock, knock, knock. The knocks echoed from just outside room 112, freezing David's body like a slab of stone. Each knock was heavy and deep, as if something far bigger than a human hand was striking the door. It did not sound rushed, or panicked, or violent. It had rhythm, purpose, a pattern, a calling. The man beside David clamped onto his shoulder so hard it nearly bruised, his breath shaking. "Do not make a sound." David felt every cell in his body lock up, but something worse happened. The claw mark on his leg heated up, burning, as if something inside the wound was starting to move. The knocks came again, harder this time, closer. It was not knocking on the door. It was knocking on David's bones. Thud, thud, thud. The vibrations shot straight through his chest. The man quietly broke into tears, but forced himself not to sob. "It is not looking for a room. It is looking for you." David swallowed hard, his throat scraping dry. His heart pounded so violently it hurt. Both of them stood perfectly still, like statues. Only David's ragged breathing and the man's suppressed whimper broke the darkness. Then the third knock stopped silence. A long, suffocating silence, thick and heavy like the black sludge dripping from the ceiling. David held his breath. No footsteps, no dragging sounds, no breathing, no crawling, nothing. And that silence terrified David more than any sound could. The man leaned close to David's ear, whispering in a cracked voice, "When it goes quiet, that is the most dangerous time. That means it is." He hesitated. Cold sweat ran down his temple. Listening. David stared at the door. Under the faint shimmer of the flashlight, the door looked normal. No dents, no scratches, but the shadow beneath the door stretched far too long, too wide, as if something large was standing on the other side, blocking the light. And then a voice slid through the door crack. Not a whisper, not a hiss, not childish giggling. A voice exactly like David's. Clear, slow, cold. "David, open the door." David froze. The veins in his neck tightened. His skin went cold. That voice, it was his voice, but warped, stretched, like it was speaking from under deep water. The man panicked and swung his pepper spray toward the door. "That is not you. Do not answer it." David staggered backward, his spine hitting the table. The burning in his leg intensified. He could feel things moving beneath the skin, slithering. Another voice came from the other side of the door. A second voice, a woman, raspy, drawn out. "David, does it hurt?" David's stomach dropped. He did not recognize the voice, but it rang like some distant memory that should not exist. Then came a third voice, a child's voice, a little girl calling out softly, "Daddy!" David collapsed onto the floor, hands over his ears. But the voices kept threading into his brain, as if they were speaking from inside his skull, not outside the door. The man grabbed him and shook him hard. "It is bending your mind. Do not listen. Do not speak, or it will get in." Black veins spread rapidly from David's claw marks, branching across his thigh like spider webs. David gasped. "What is it doing to me?" The man screamed in a whisper. "It marked you the first night. It can use any voice to pull you out." The knocks returned, not gentle, not rhythmic, but slamming, full force. A hand the size of a plate hitting the door. "Bam! Bam! Bam!" The man cursed, dragging David behind the table. "The light. Turn it off." It seized through the light. David switched off the flashlight. The room drowned in pitch blackness, as if plunged under water. David grabbed the man's sleeve. "Can it get in?" The man whispered so quiet, it sounded like breath. "If it uses your voice, the door will unlock by itself." David stopped breathing. Outside, footsteps. Not one set, not two, dozens, hundreds, as if the entire building stood outside the door, all pressing against it, waiting. David began to cry silently. Then a single, soft knock tapped directly beside his ear, not from the door, not from the wall, but from behind him. David turned. The man turned. Both of them froze in the darkness. Standing in the far corner beneath the cracked mirror was a figure, the shape of a man, exactly David's height, David's build, David's hair, David's outline. But the face was ruined, stretched, broken, as if someone had glued shattered mirror pieces together in the shape of him. It opened its mouth and spoke in David's perfect voice, every breath identical. "I got in," David screamed. The ceiling lights exploded on. In that blinding flash, there was not one David standing in the room. There were three, then more and more, all of them him. Twisted, warped, half-formed, smiling with shredded mouths. All of them spoke at once. "Go down," David screamed when the ceiling light snapped on, flooding the small room, and in that instant, he saw dozens of faces staring back at him, faces that were all his, not one, not two, but an entire crowd, each one warped, twisted, malformed, as if someone tried to sculpt David out of wet clay while forgetting how a human body should look. One David had a mouth ripped wide open from ear to ear, teeth long and needle-sharp. Another had hollow sockets with only milky eyeballs left, and its lips were sewn shut with long black threads. Another had a neck bent completely sideways, head slumped against its shoulder. Another was missing half its face as if torn away. One looked exactly like him, except it had no eyelids. Its exposed eyeballs cracked dry and leaking blood. These were not illusions, not shadows, not tricks. They were looking at him, like starving animals seeing a fresh meal. Their voices rose together, layer after layer, distorted like a broken radio. "Go down below," the man beside David screamed, voice cracking with desperation. "Do not look at them. Run! Run now!" David sprinted toward the door, but one of the Davids, the one with its mouth sewn shut, stepped in front of him. Its lips didn't move, but a boiling, bubbling sound rose from deep inside its chest. David backed up. The others stepped closer, forming a circle around him. They didn't attack, didn't touch him. They just surrounded him. The man grabbed David's wrist and dragged him toward the corner. "This time it does not want to take you yet. It wants you to go down on your own." David shouted, "Why does it need me?" The man shoved him against the wall, his breathing broken. "Because you didn't die. Like I did, because you are still whole. It needs a body that is intact to wear." David froze. He looked at his leg. The black claw marks had already spread up to his knee, branching like dark roots climbing under his skin. The knocking returned, not from the door, not from the floor. It came from inside David's skull. "Knock, knock, knock." David clutched his head. "Get out of my head. Get out." Of the twisted Davids stepped forward, its face sliding into the light, rows of jagged black teeth gleaming. It smiled, his smile, the one he knew from his own mirror. Then it whispered in his exact voice, dry as paper scraping stone, "Come down, be with us. It is better down there." David swung his fist at it in panic, and its face shattered like glass. Chunks of flesh and skin slid down its neck like melting clay. But immediately, another head pushed up from its shoulders. Another David. Another perfect copy. David screamed, terror flooding every corner of his mind. The man yanked him back. "Do not touch them. They are not the real thing. They are its shallow form. Their only job is to stall you until It rises. David felt his heart seize until it rises. He stumbled back into the corner with the man. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice, 3 times, and all the copies vanished. David turned left, nothing. Right, nothing. Behind him, empty. The room was completely bare. David almost exhaled until... A hand fell on his shoulder. David spun around. It wasn't a copy. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't a shadow. It was the man. But his face had changed. The skin on his cheeks was splitting open. His mouth stretched all the way to the side of his jaw. One eye had slipped halfway down his cheek. His voice crawled out of his throat. "You think I am still me?" David fell backward, horrified. The man or whatever wore his skin crawled toward him like a predator. Its voice scraped through sharp teeth like metal blades. "You should have gone down on the first night. You made it wait 2 weeks." David hurled anything he could grab: a lamp, a chair, broken wood. He snatched up the broken table leg and smashed it across the creature's face. The wood split in half. The man's face warped further, revealing black flesh writhing underneath. But he didn't bleed, didn't flinch, didn't scream. He smiled, a smile stretching all the way to the ears. David bolted for the door, fumbling for the lock, but the creature dragged him by the leg. David fell hard, his head striking the floor. The world spun, sound warped, everything tilted. Then the floor beneath him cracked. Black veins spread in a perfect circle, glowing faintly. A sound rose from the deep earth, like the breathing of something enormous, something that had slept for centuries. Then a voice, not the ceiling creature's voice, not the parasite's voice, but something deeper, vast, ancient. "It is time," the man screamed, his voice twisting unnaturally. "No, it is coming up." A massive black hand burst through the floor, fingers curling around the wall like a spider emerging from a cocoon. Each finger was as long as a chair leg, each claw the length of a kitchen knife. A thunderous rumble shook the room, a chorus of hundreds of voices speaking as one. "David." The man was yanked backward like a rag doll, his mouth tearing open all the way to his ears as he tried to scream. David slipped in the black sludge covering the floor. He clawed toward the door, crawling, slipping, fighting to stand. Then the door opened. From the outside, cold air swept in, hallway lights flashed, and standing in the doorway was David, a perfect David, uninjured, unscarred, untouched, uninfected. He looked down at the real David on the ground, smiled. "You are late." David stared in disbelief, choking on his breath. What are you?" The perfect David stepped inside, footsteps soft as dust. He knelt beside the real David and whispered into his ear, "I am you. I am the part of you it wants to bring up." He placed a cold hand on David's shoulder. "And you," his voice deepened, distorted, icy, "need to go down." The floor split wide open. A giant mouth beneath the room yawned like a bottomless pit, and David was pulled into it. David didn't have time to scream, no time to react, no time to think. The instant the floor opened like a giant mouth, a violent force yanked him downward, like 100 invisible hands had grabbed his ankles and dragged him straight into the earth. He wasn't falling. He was being swallowed. Air rushed past him in reverse, spiraling into the hole like a silent tornado. Every sound stretched out, warped, torn apart as if shredded through layers of space. David felt the thick, cold sludge from the opening smear across his legs, then crawl upward past his thighs, toward his stomach like dozens of icy tendrils curling around his skin. He clawed at the collapsing edges of the floor, trying to grip anything solid, but the surfaces were slick and freezing, lined with dark, pulsing veins. Everything beneath the floor was alive. At the edge of the opening, David saw the perfect copy of him leaning over, watching him fall. The copy's face was calm in the most horrifying way, blank, soulless eyes glowing like polished wax. David reached upward desperately, fingers shaking. "Don't pull me up, please." His copy leaned closer, its artificial face stretching into an inhumanly wide smile. "Down below is correct." Then it lifted its hand, and David dropped. David plunged through darkness as thick as tar. No gravity, no direction, no wind, only a twisting scream of air around his ears, bending into whispering voices. Come down. Come to us. Finally." Then he slammed into something, not solid, not liquid, something soft, cold, wet, and pulsing, like he had fallen onto a giant lung. David rolled, slid, and tumbled down a curved surface before spilling into a fog-filled space. He pushed himself up, trembling, breath scraping through his throat. The place around him. It wasn't a basement. It wasn't part of the real world. It was beneath the building, but not in the physical sense. It was like he'd been swallowed into the inside of a creature, its insides forming endless hallways, rooms with doors in wrong places, staircases going up but touching no ceilings. The air was thick and humid, smelling of mold, blood, soil, and something disturbingly sweet. The scent of decay. David coughed violently. His cough echoed, but not normally. Dozens of mock voices coughed back at him from the dark. He shook, looking around. The space was breathing. Walls expanded and contracted like lungs. The ground trembled faintly like muscles twitching beneath flesh. Black mist leaked from cracks in the surface. David whispered, "God, where am I?" A voice answered behind him. "A place without God." David turned quickly. The man, the former tenant of room 105, stood there, but he was not the same. The lower half of his body had transformed into twisting black masses. His left arm had elongated like a spider limb, veins bulging through stretched skin. His face was broken even more than before. Jaw split wider, one cheek collapsing, one eye dangling halfway down, but he was still conscious. He rasped, "You came down too?" David stumbled back. "How are you? It tried to wear me. Remember?" He laughed weakly, the sound trembling like torn cloth. "But I escaped." "Down here." David swallowed hard. This is it. This is where it lives." The man nodded slowly. "This is its stomach. The building is not a shell. It is part of it, a living body. You are inside it." David's blood turned to ice. "The thing that knocks at 3 a.m. He murmured, voice shaking. "What is it?" The man inched closer, every step accompanied by the sound of wet flesh dragging. "It is not a ghost." His voice deepened. "Not a demon." He looked David directly in the eye, his irises cracked black and white. "It is the master of the dark beneath abandoned buildings, a creature that feeds on memory, on shadows, on the self. It exists parallel to our world. It knocks to ask permission to enter." David shook his head. "Permission? It attacked me." The man let out a broken laugh, his cheek tearing further. "When it knocks, if you open the door, that means you agree to be called." He looked at David with a grief-stricken stare. "You opened the door on the first night. Remember?" David's breath caught. He remembered. He had opened the door. He had looked through the peephole and seen the darkness blocking the lens. David whispered, horrified, "No, I only looked. I didn't open." The man cut him off sharply. "But you were awake. It called at exactly 3:00 a.m. and you answered by walking to the door." David froze. Cold sweat ran down his spine. The man's voice dropped lower. "All it needs is your attention. You looked, you thought about it, and that was enough for it to step inside." David collapsed, holding his head, shaking uncontrollably. In the distant dark, something scraped. A chain dragging, a claw dragging, a knock. Knock, knock, knock. But now it wasn't coming from a door. It came from beneath his feet, then from above him, then from all around. No surfaces, no directions. The knocking was everywhere. The man began shaking violently, eyes widening in terror. "No, no, no, it's coming. It's coming." David scrambled backward as a cold wind rushed through the space. A breath, the breath of something ancient and colossal. The darkness behind the man twisted inward, swirling. A hand, longer than anything Dia ever seen, slithered out of the swirling void. It didn't grab, it didn't pull, it simply emerged, as if the darkness itself was opening like a door. The hand settled on the man's shoulder. The man screamed, "David, run!" But David couldn't move. He was rooted to the spot, right before his eyes. The darkness peeled open into a mouth. A mouth whispered, "You go deeper." David was dragged into a tunnel of pure darkness. No sight, no breath, no sense of self. He didn't even know who he was anymore. David could not feel his body for the first few seconds. He was falling, or being pulled, or being pushed. He could not tell. There was no direction, no point of reference, no gravity, only a descent with no end. The darkness around him was not just black, it was thick, heavy, like a liquid pressing on every inch of his skin. It seeped into his ears, his pores, as if the dark itself had weight. David tried to open his mouth to breathe, but no air came in, no oxygen, no wind. But he did not die, as if whatever dragged him down did not want him to die too quickly. In rising panic, a red glow appeared beneath him. No, not a glow, an eye, a massive eye, opening slowly in the middle of the dark. He tried to scream. The sound never left his throat. It crawled backward into his skull and dissolved into a warped echo. Then, thud, his body slammed into something soft, sinking slightly. The surface beneath him pulsed and exhaled a warm, moldy breath that swept across his skin like the breath of a corpse that had never fully died. David pushed himself upright, desperate to move, desperate to escape, but what he saw froze his blood. He was in a hallway that stretched endlessly in both directions. It looked like the hallway upstairs, same walls, same door frames, same ceiling lights, but everything wavered, melting in slow motion. The walls looked like flesh, layered with muscle fibers. The doors swelled and sank like rib cages. The ceiling lights did not illuminate. They blinked like eyelids. David backed away, trembling. This is not real. A whisper drifted from the walls, the floor, the ceiling, and from inside his own chest. This is more real. David clamped his hands over his ears. It did not help. Ahead of him, a door marked 304 shifted. It did not open. It inhaled. David froze in place. Room 304 above was where the nightmare had begun. What was room 304 down here? He didn't have time to wonder. The door split open, not like a normal door. It tore, like skin being cut open. A hand reached out from the tear, then a second hand, then a head, featureless except for a mouth that took up half its face. David stumbled back, heart pounding. The thing crawled out, as if squeezing through a hole too small for its body. Bones cracking, flesh stretching like melted rubber. When it finally emerged, David realized it was not the creature he had seen before, not one of his copies, not the ceiling monster. It was a person, or what was left of one. Skin hung from its body in dripping sheets. Its arms were long and warped like pulled taffy, and its mouth. The mouth was not only on its face. There were mouths on its chest, on its stomach, on its arms, everywhere. When it spoke, all the mouths opened at once. Go deeper. David did not think. He bolted. His legs were weak. He fell twice, skidding across the slick black slime coating the floor. But he forced himself up each time. The creature behind him dragged itself forward with scraping footsteps like claws on steel. The hallway warped as he ran. Walls bent inward. The ceiling pressed down. The floor rose in waves. The building knew he was running. It wanted to keep him. David screamed, "Please, stop. Please stop." But the only reply was the sound of the thing chasing him. Suddenly, a door on his left, room 112, burst open, not gently, but as if slammed by something huge. The man who had helped him upstairs appeared, but he was no longer a man. His body had twisted into 4 limbs, crawling on inverted joints. His head hung upside down behind his back. His mouth drooled thick black fluid. He shrieked, "David, you can't outrun it anymore. It's awake." His voice echoed like it came through a crushed metal pipe. The entire hallway shook violently. A knock, but not like before. Thoom! A massive impact, as if a giant hammer struck the ground from below. Then another. Thoom! The floor split open down its length. Then the third. Thoom! The ceiling cracked open in a jagged line. From the gap above, darkness poured downward, like water, like ink, like something alive. David was thrown against the wall by the force. The darkness was not just a shadow. It was liquid. It had hands. It breathed. It pulsed. Inside the swirling black mass, a shape began to form, enormous, submerged, impossible to fully see. David stammered, paralyzed with terror. No, that is. The darkness turned toward him. A voice rolled across the hall. Not one voice. Not many voices. All voices. His voice. The man's voice. His mother's voice, his old teacher's voice, a stranger's voice, the voice of the thing he had seen the night before, all speaking together. Come deeper. David tried to run, but a tendril of darkness snapped around his ankle, dragging him backward across the floor. He clawed at the walls. He kicked. He screamed. Nothing worked. The darkness lifted him like lifting a doll. It placed him directly before its shifting shape. David sensed without seeing eyes behind the veil, eyes huge enough to eclipse everything, eyes older than any world he knew. A breath, both hot and icy, washed over his face. The voice whispered like the edge of the universe. Welcome to the second layer. David lost consciousness instantly. David woke with the feeling that his skull was cracking apart. Pain pulsed from the back of his head down his spine like burning wire, dropping him to his knees before he even understood where he was. There was no light, no ceiling, no real floor. The thing he stood on felt like a thick membrane, soft, damp, dipping slightly beneath his weight, like standing on the tongue of a sleeping giant. His pulse hammered. His ears rang. The darkness around him was so dense he could not tell if anything was near or far. Then a deep, heavy sound rolled from somewhere in the distance. Awake, not a human voice. David inhaled sharply and clenched his fists to keep them from shaking, but even his breath echoed across the space like a scream, as if this place rejected any sound that was not its own. He whispered, "Is anyone here?" And in answer, hundreds of voices spoke at once. Women, children, men, crying, laughing, whispering, screaming. David clamped his hands over his ears, but the voices did not come from outside. They spoke inside his head. One female voice rose closest, right behind his ear, as if someone were standing inches from his neck. "Do not leave us." David spun around. Nothing, just darkness. But as his eyes slowly adjusted to the faint, sickly glow seeping through the air, he saw them. Not people, not ghosts, not corpses, silhouettes made of exposed flesh, human shapes without skin, shimmering slightly in the dim light. They stood frozen, all facing him. No eyes, no mouths, only holes round, shallow openings where features should have been, as if someone had poked through their faces with fingers. One of the figures drifted forward, not walking, gliding, pulled by something invisible. David staggered back. "Don't come near me." The creature opened one of the holes on its face, widening it like a mouth opening. A warped voice burst out. "You are like us, once human, then kept." David trembled, backing into what he thought was a wall, until the wall pulsed violently, like a beating heart. He jumped away instantly. Another voice came, older, brittle, soaked in despair. Those who are called down never escape. The lucky ones are swallowed. The unlucky. It broke into a choking sob. Stay here forever. David looked closer. In the dim light, he realized every figure around him had the same claw marks he had, the same black-stained wound, the same creeping root-like veins growing across their bodies. He looked down at his own leg. The blackness had spread past his knee, up his thigh, to his stomach. He began to shake uncontrollably. No, no, no. I don't want to become like you. A low sound rolled beneath him, like a laugh rising from inside the earth. Not like them. Mine. The ground beneath him shuddered violently. From beneath the dark membrane, something enormous began to rise. Not a hand, not a leg, a head. A massive head larger than the room he once lived in. No skin, no eyes, no hair, just a rounded mass of raw flesh covered in hundreds of mouths, every mouth breathing. David collapsed, stunned. Oh God! Cold breath poured from the mouths, each exhale releasing a different voice. I am the second layer. My people. A single enormous mouth in the center peeled open, so wide he could see nothing but infinite darkness inside. It spoke with the voices of every human being combined. I called you. You heard. You looked. You answered. The voice dropped deeper. Now you are here. David scrambled backward, but the ground rose behind him, forming a wall that blocked any escape. No, no, please. I do not want to be here. One of the skinless figures floated to him and touched his shoulder with a freezing hand. No one wants it, but all come down. David swatted it away, jumped to his feet, and ran. He sprinted through the warped hallway, past rows of flesh figures who watched without moving, past walls that breathed, past door after door labeled 304, repeating endlessly like a broken loop. But the farther he ran, the more the space twisted. Walls curled, the ceiling flipped, doors slid to the floor, figures drifted upside down. David screamed, I want to go up. I want to go back. The space answered, there is no up. Suddenly a door marked 304 burst open in front of him. Inside was no room, no darkness, no corridor. It was him, a perfect David. No wounds, no black marks, no infection. The other David stepped out, smiling faintly. You are the leftover piece. I am the complete one. David froze. The thing approached him, face to face. It was not twisted like the others, not warped, not monstrous. It was better than human, better than him. It whispered, up there needs a new David, then placed a cold hand against David's chest. And you will stay down here. With us. David tried to shove him away, but the fake was impossibly strong. The gigantic mouth from below boomed. Correct. The ground opened under David's feet. He dropped into an even deeper darkness. The third layer. David fell. He kept falling, falling without direction, without weight, without air, without sound. Nothing existed except the pounding of his own heart and the deeper, slower heartbeat of something massive far below. That heartbeat echoed through the darkness like a cathedral bell struck beneath the earth. Thump, thump, Thump! Every pulse twisted the space around him. Black veins in the air vibrated like electric wires, and David felt his own blood trembling in response. He could not tell how long he fell. A minute, an hour, a day. Then he struck something soft. Not soft like a cushion, soft like meat. He fell into it and sank for a moment, before the surface pushed him back up like an air-filled organ. David staggered upright, gasping, dry heaving. This place was nothing like the layers above. No hallways, no doors, no structure made by humans. The third layer looked like the inside of an ancient creature. Columns of black flesh rose like ribs. The ground pulsed like muscle under a heartbeat. Dark vapors hissed through the cracks in the walls, each burst sounding like a trapped scream. David whispered, "Where am I?" A voice breathed directly behind his neck, a place where no one has a name anymore. David spun around. In front of him stood a figure, something that might have been a person long ago. Its body was thin as paper, stretched twice the length of a normal human. Arms and legs twisted like dried roots. The torso flattened like a shadow pinned in midair. But the head was a round, hollow sphere covered in dozens of tiny mouths that opened and closed silently, exhaling cold air. The voice, however, came from inside David's own skull, not from the thing before him. "We were once people called down, but here in this layer, no one holds their shape anymore." David stumbled backward. "No, I will not become like you. I will not." The creature drifted closer and laid a thin hand on his shoulder. The instant it touched him, a surge of memories not his own flooded his mind. A woman opening her apartment door at 3 a.m. A man dragged through a hallway by something under the floor. A child under a table calling for his father through the sound of knocking. Then each memory dissolved into the chorus of cries and whispers echoing around them. David screamed, "Stop! Stop showing me that!" The figure withdrew its hand, folding in on itself as if afraid of the dim light. Its voice cracked. "There is no I in this layer. No you, only it." David stepped back, but his heel struck something soft and slick. He looked down. A human face pushing up through the ground like a bubble in thick liquid. Skin stretched tight, eyes rolled white, mouth wide open. It was not alive, but it was still mouthing words. David cried out and stumbled back further, straight into another face rising behind him, and another, and another. The entire ground was made of trapped faces. They whispered together, "Do not go back up." David clenched his teeth, trembling. I have to get out of here." A sudden force yanked his shirt. David spun around. Standing in front of him was his perfect copy, the flawless David, the one who appeared upstairs, the one who stepped into the world above. He smiled without emotion, without a soul. "Up there needs me. Down here needs you." David lunged and punched him. His fist passed straight through the copy, like punching smoke. The copy leaned closer. "Down here. You cannot hold on to anything that belongs to you." Then he placed a hand on David's forehead. The hand was ice cold, cold enough to pierce straight through his skin and touch his brain. David shrieked, "Let go of me." The copy tilted his head calmly. I take memory. You take what is left. David's memories tore free of him, like threads ripped from fabric. Him opening the door of room 304. Him staring into his bathroom mirror. Him moving into the apartment. Him arguing with his ex. Standing over his mother's grave. Eating dinner alone. Hearing the knocking for the first time. Each memory twisted and pulled away from him, floating out of his skull as pale smoke, drifting into the cracks of the walls where the layer devoured them. David collapsed. His eyes were open but unfocused. His breath came in ragged gasps, as though his soul was draining out through his chest. The copy spoke. You came down to be replaced. You stay down here forever. I stay above forever. David tried to stand, but his legs gave way. The black veins from the claw marks surged up his body, spreading across his chest, neck, and face. The copy looked at him coldly. This layer will eat the rest of you. Then he turned, walking into a door. The only door that existed in the third layer, room 304, but made of living flesh and bone, beating like a heart. When he vanished behind it, darkness spilled outward like a rising tide, and from deep within that darkness, a soft voice rose, a gentle voice. A mother's voice. Come here, child. Come to me. David crawled backward, but the ground cracked open beneath him. A giant hand wrapped around his ankle, then another, and another. Dozens, hundreds. They pulled him down with a pleading softness. Stay with us. David screamed as the third layer swallowed him whole. David was dragged downward like a cloth doll. Dozens of thin hands, cold as dry bone, clamped around his legs, dug into his hips, and clutched his shoulders. They gnawed at his skin like creatures starving for centuries. He kicked wildly, clawing at the soft flesh under the floor, trying to pull himself free of the widening hole, but the ground was not ground. It stretched like skin, and beneath that layer of living skin were faces. Hundreds, thousands, every face staring up at him. White eyes, open mouths, all whispering together. Stay here, stay here. Do not leave. David screamed, "Let go of me." His scream bent in the air, twisted, then folded back into his own skull, as if the place refused to let sound escape. A black hand below yanked harder, and David felt his joints nearly tear apart. He grabbed onto something that jutted out of the floor, something like a rib of this living layer, straining to hold his body up. His grip slipped, but not completely, because beneath his hand, a human face opened its eyes. Its dry mouth cracked wider, and a rasping voice spoke from the torn lips. "Do not go down. Do not go down there." David gasped. Are you talking, or is it talking through you?" The face trembled, fighting itself. The eyes rolled back, splitting at the corners as if being torn. The voice wavered. "Cannot speak long. It hears." Then it shrieked, "Run!" But David could not run, because the ground around him began to swell. Not swell like breaking earth, swell like a mouth opening. A massive mouth ripped open in the floor, teeth layered in circles like a monstrous shark jaw. Darkness pulsed inside it like a lung, and each breath released a childlike giggle. "Come down. down with us." David gagged. The people here, the ones who once lived, had become food, or worse, voices for the thing that owned this place. The third layer shook like an earthquake. The ground bulged under David's feet. The paper-thin shadows around him folded inward like creatures hiding from something waking up. The giant heartbeat slowed. "Oh," then quickened. A voice echoed everywhere at once, male, female, old, young. "It has woken." David froze. The thin bodies slid into the fleshy walls, vanishing into cracks. Faces in the floor squeezed their mouths shut. Eyes rolled back. Silence fell. Then a whisper pressed directly into David's ear, as if lips touched his skin. "David." He jerked upright, tearing free from the black hands and grabbing a pulsing column of flesh. The voice came again, deeper. "You cannot run." This time, it was his own voice, lower, older, dragged upward from the roots of the earth. David shook, shouting, "Why me? Why is it me?" The answer vibrated through his bones. "Because you opened the door." David screamed back, "I did not open it. I only looked through the peephole. I only looked." The walls cracked. Darkness poured out like liquid, forming a humanoid shape that grew like clay pulled by unseen fingers. A face emerged on it, eyes closed, yet somehow still watching. It smiled with broken lines running across the cheeks. "Looking is opening." David staggered back toward a mouth in the floor. "No, no, I did not know." Multiple voices overlapped, men, women, children, all speaking at once. "You did not know, but you still open. That is enough." The creature peeled from the wall and crawled toward him with backwards bending limbs. David ran. He sprinted through pulsing pillars, across living flesh that tightened under his feet, past pits of darkness that had no bottom. He ran because instinct told him to. He ran because he had nothing else, until he saw a door, not a door of flesh, not a bone door, not room 304. His door, the door to his rented room. Old wooden frame, faded number 304. Perfectly clean. David froze. This door could not be here. This door did not belong on the third layer. Warm yellow light leaked from beneath it. David whispered, "Home." His shaking hand reached the knob. Warm. He began crying with relief. "I made it. I actually made it back. I can go home." He turned the knob. The door opened. Light spilled out. David stepped inside, and the moment his foot crossed the threshold, he knew something was wrong. No bed, no table, no walls, no windows, no real floor. Just a white room, empty, endless, silent, and at the center, with his back turned, stood himself. "A perfect copy," David whispered. Who are you?" The copy did not turn. It spoke softly, trying the fit. "Oh." David collapsed against the door, but the doorknob melted under his hand, turning soft and warm like flesh, clinging to his palm. The door slammed shut behind him. David pounded on it. "Let me out. Let me out. I am not what you want." The copy slowly turned around. The face was flawless. Too flawless. The eyes had no iris. The mouth curved into a gentle, welcoming smile. "You are wrong. You were always always what I wanted. David backed away. No, get off me. The copy placed its hand on David's chest. The hand slipped through his skin like dipping fingers into water. David screamed as pain burst through his ribs and spine. The copy leaned close, whispering, "Stay down below. I will take the clean part back up." Then it stepped over him and walked out through a wall of white light. Behind it, David was dragged downward again, hands clutching him, hands whispering, "Stay with us. Stay, stay." The third layer sealed itself, and David sank even deeper. David had no idea how long he was falling. This time there was no wind, no sound, no light, only the sensation of plunging straight into an enormous emptiness, big enough to swallow a soul whole. He opened his eyes, but there was nothing to see, just blackness, thick as mud, heavy as lead, pressing in on everything. David tried to raise his hand, but his arm did not move. Panic detonated inside his mind, not because he was being held down, not because something was grabbing him, but because he could not feel his arm at all. His voice cracked. "Where is my arm?" He tried to wiggle his toes. Nothing. No movement. No sensation. It was as if his body had been taken apart and tossed away somewhere in the dark. A whisper slid up behind him, thin as thread, but close enough to feel breath on his ear. "You do not need a shape. Down here. Shape is burden." David tried to turn, or thought he did, but he could not tell whether he was moving. He no longer had arms, no legs, no back, no chest. He was drifting as a thought. Terrified, David screamed, "Who am I?" The darkness rippled like something laughing. Another voice answered. This one sounded like his mother's. "Names do not matter. This layer does not keep names. It keeps what is left." David felt himself stretching apart, mind unraveling into 1,000 threads, each drifting in a different direction, and carried along those threads came fragments of his life, his mother's smile, the smell of coffee, the warmth of a winter bed, morning sunlight, lonely evenings, the first night he heard the knocking, all pulled away like loose thread. David screamed, "Stop! Stop! Do not take them! Do not!" A deeper voice, calm, ancient, absolute, answered from everywhere. "Your memories are what hurt you. We take them to make you lighter." David trembled, or imagined he trembled. He no longer knew if he had a body. "No, I need my memories. I need to know who I am." The darkness surged over him like a giant wave. "You are the one who was replaced." David went silent. The words cut through his last piece of hope like a knife. Faces drifted out of the dark around him, faces like his, but wrong, twisted, incomplete. One missing eyes, one missing a mouth, one burned black along half the cheek. They whispered, "We were real once," until the copy went up. David choked. You all were replaced too." A face nodded. "Replaced, forgotten, remembered only when it knocked, then dragged down." Another face added, voice shaking, "It needs a perfect shape to wear above. The one replaced stays here forever." David tried to swallow, but he might not even have a throat. Why? Why does this exist? Why me? The voice of the third layer answered. Because you heard the knock. Because you answered. Because you stood up at 3 a.m. Because you approached the door. Because you waited. Because you feared. Fear is the perfect invitation. David felt a coldness deeper than bone, deeper than existence. I did not invite anything. I never wanted this. The darkness burst into a cracking laugh like rotted wood breaking apart. Everyone says that. Suddenly, a pale light opened in the blackness. Not white, not yellow, more like the dull gray of a morgue lamp. Inside that glow stood a figure, a human figure, with arms, with legs, solid, balanced. David whispered, "Meh." It was him, but not him anymore. Perfect, unscarred, whole, a living statue. David trembled. That is not me. That thing took my shape. The copy stepped closer. Its voice was cold, like wind slipping through a crack in a dead house. I did not take your shape. I am the shape. David retreated into the dark. Get away from me. The copy tilted its head gently the same way David tilted his head in every mirror he had ever seen. It does not need you anymore. You have been delivered down. I will go up. David choked on the empty air. Where? The copy answered softly. Up there. Your world. Your friends. Your work. The life you lived. Its voice lowered. I will live your life. Better than you ever did. David broke, or thought he did. He had no body left to break. The copy whispered, "Goodbye, David." A white doorway opened behind it, the color of the real world. David screamed, "Raw, do not go. Do not go up there. That is my life. Mine. The copy stepped through the light. The doorway sealed shut, leaving David alone in the dark. Forever. No body, no voice, no name. Only the whisper of the third layer. You belong to us. The space behind the copy of David sealed shut like a sheet of cold metal scraping across stone. The third layer sank into thick, choking darkness. David could not see through, could not outrun, and could not resist. From that endless void, David, or whatever remained of him, floated without weight, without shape, without any sense of up or down. He had no hands to grab with, no legs to run with, no mouth to scream with, no eyes to cry with, but he still had a mind, and the mind was the punishment. David tried to call out, "Can anyone hear me?" His voice sounded like it came from far behind him, distorted like a broken radio whispering through static. No one answered, only the breathing of the third layer, long, slow, freezing cold, filling the void like poisonous fog. Then, from the darkness, a shape drifted toward him, not a warped shadow, not a screaming face from the floor, but a child, a little girl, around 8 years old, her hair long, black, tangled, hanging in front of her face, her skin white but not human white. It was the color of wax. A deep cut ran across her neck, flesh pulled open as if she had been dragged for miles. She did not touch the ground. She floated. Her voice echoed from every direction, not from the tiny cracked mouth on her face. "You are down now." David trembled, or thought he did. "Who are you?" The girl tilted her head, slowly, unnervingly. Then she raised her hand. Her small fingers had no nails, just long joints. Too many joints, as if someone molded extra segments into them. I am the one before you. David froze. His breath, whatever breath, was now tightened painfully. The girl's voice cracked through the darkness, each word forcing itself out through the fissures in her waxy skin. It replaced me. I was kept. Just like you. David forced himself to speak. How long have you been here? The girl laughed, a brittle laugh, like glass shattering. Here, there is no long, only still here. Then a black wind snatched her shape and pulled her violently into a corner of the void. But before she disappeared, she whispered one last thing. Do not let your mind fade, or you will become the flesh of this layer. David tried to scream, run, reach for something, but he had no body. He only drifted above the real world, the false. David opened his eyes. He stood in room 304, the warm yellow glow of the hallway spilling into his new eyes like a comforting sunrise he had never had before. He inhaled deeply. Human air was different. Dust, smell, warmth, life. He smiled, a perfect, soft smile. The same smile David used whenever he practiced looking calm in a mirror. The copy looked around the familiar room, the old table, the clock, the curtains, David's shoes, his jacket thrown over the chair, the unzipped backpack, the faint smell of body wash, the scent of human living. Everything belonged to him now. He walked to the mirror, placed a gentle hand against the reflection, a gesture full of satisfaction. Perfect. He rolled his shoulders, trying the body on, everything aligned. The third layer always chose a fully intact body to wear. David was ideal. The copy stared into the mirror and whispered, humans are very easy to live as. Then, a knock, not from the door, not from the wall, from inside the mirror. Knock! He saw his reflection, but it did not move with him. Knock! The reflection smiled, but not his smile. It was David's real smile, or whatever was left of him. The copy leaned in, amused. Stop calling. You are down there now. Knock! The reflection twisted, then vanished. Below the third layer, David felt something. A pull, a hook digging into the center of his mind. Something was tugging him in a direction he could no longer name. He tried to anchor himself. It failed. A face drifted across him and whispered, above is closing. When the last door shuts, you will forget yourself. David fought with everything he had left. No, I do not want to be forgotten. The voice of the third layer thundered, colder, heavier, absolute. You must be forgotten. That is how you are kept. Darkness wrapped around his thoughts. A crack opened beneath him, or where his feet would be if he still had any. From the crack, a hand reached out, not a monster's hand, not black flesh, a human hand. David's hand, the hand of the false David, reaching into the third layer. The copy spoke with David's voice. Perfectly. Good night, David. Then he shut the final door. Thud! The third layer quaked. Far away, hundreds of mouths in the ground opened at once. One more. Kept. David tried to scream. No sound came. Ah. The third layer squeezed around him, compressing him into something not human, not shadow, not object, but part of itself. In the final moment before his mind dissolved, David heard footsteps, the footsteps of the thing wearing his life, walking farther and farther away, up into the real world. And his last thought, if it is up there, who will know I ever existed? No one. The third layer closed. David vanished. Above in the human world, the false David stepped out of room 304 with slow, confident steps, as if he had lived here all his life. He closed the door gently, silently, nothing like the way the real David used to shut it. Tired, worn out, lonely. The hallway was empty. The fluorescent lights flickered once, then settled. No more knocking, no more whispers, no more shadows slipping under the door, only the warm, ordinary quiet of human life. Perfect, he murmured. He descended the stairs. His feet touched each step lightly, too lightly without the natural rhythm of a human step. Reaching the lobby, he paused in front of the large mirror hanging by the entrance. His reflection stared back, but the reflection did not smile with him. It watched him hollow, black, furious. He lifted his hand to the glass. The reflection flinched as if burned. "Behave," he whispered. The reflection vanished entirely, leaving only his own image calm, clean, warm, like a normal man. He pushed the front door open and walked outside. No one noticed anything strange. No one looked at him for more than a second, and he loved that. Below the third layer, in the formless dark, David drifted. What remained of his mind was stretched thin, torn apart, and pushed into the deepest corners of the third layer. No sense of time, no sense of body, only memories half-eaten, torn like pages ripped from a book. He whispered into the void, "Who am I?" No answer, only the heavy breathing of the third layer, ancient, cold, exhausted, then a faint voice. Fragile, rising from deep in the dark. "You are still you, if you remember who you are." David turned his fading awareness toward the voice. A faint shape drifted toward him. The girl, the child replaced long before he arrived. Her voice cut into him like a thin needle. "Do not let it take your name. If you forget your name, you will become another mouth in this layer." David trembled. "How do I keep it? I do not have a body to hold on to." The girl floated closer, her long black hair waving like underwater strands. "The body does not matter. The name matters now." David tried to say it. "David, I am David." But the sound warped. His name shattered into fragments, as if the third layer hated it, rejected it, tried to erase it. The girl screamed, "Hold it, repeat it, now." David forced his fading voice to rise. "David, David, I am David." The darkness shook violently. Hundreds of faces beneath the shifting ground opened their eyes, mouths stretching wide in protest. No name, no self, no form. Hands made of living flesh reached upward, clawing at David's fragile awareness, pulling, dragging. He screamed back, "I am David." A loud crack exploded through the layer. The third layer shrieked in rage. Massive mouths opened wide, stay nameless. The girl, with the last of her strength, pushed David into a deeper pocket of shadow. Go! Hide deeper. Before it resets, the darkness swallowed her. Her face was pulled downward, gone. David fell into a quiet, hollow zone. A place the third layer could not fully touch. A place with no mouths, no hands, no voices. He held his name inside him, his only lifeline. David. A tiny spark flickered in the void, the spark of identity. Not enough to save him, but enough to stop him from becoming meat. Above the false David, the copy settled into David's life perfectly. He ate, he slept, he worked, he talked, he smiled, the exact smile David used to smile. No one suspected a thing. But every night, exactly 3:00 a.m., he stood at the door, and he knocked. Knock, knock, knock. Not to call anything, not to enter anywhere, but to send a signal down to the third layer. I am still here. One night, he sat before the mirror. The reflection no longer resisted. It stayed still like something that had finally surrendered. The false. David looked at the mirror and whispered, "You have been replaced. The world above only needs one David." He tilted his head slightly, but then a knock came from behind him. Not the mirror, not the door, the ceiling. Knock, knock, knock. He froze. The smile drained from his face. The knocking continued. Knock, knock, knock. The false David lifted his head, eyes narrowing. A flicker of fear showed for the first time. Then a thin, fragile voice whispered right behind his ear, "I am David." His body went stiff, ice cold. The ceiling cracked open. A drop of black liquid fell to the floor. Knock, knock, knock. The false David stepped back. His smile vanished completely. Impossible. The voice grew stronger, closer, clearer. "I am David." The false David opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Behind him, his mirror reflection smiled. A wide, unnatural smile no human face could make, and it whispered, "I was never eaten completely." Below, in the third layer, the real David opened his eyes, or rather, his awareness ignited. A path appeared, a way out. He breathed, or thought he breathed. "I still exist." The third layer roared in fury. Walls of living flesh opened into mouths, reaching for him. But now, David did not run. He did not hide. He did not panic. He held his name tightly, like a flame, and he began to climb upward.